Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the source material you've given us, all the articles, the studies, the research, and we turn that heavy stack into, well, knowledge you can use right away.
And today, we're going on a pretty fascinating journey.
I think so. We're getting right into the inner mechanics of those really deep meditative states of absorption.
States known as jhana.
Exactly.
And our mission today is very targeted. We're drawing on some really cutting-edge cognitive neuroscience and also contemplative studies to figure out the neurological architecture of profound stillness.
We have two core questions we're trying to solve. First, how do you even establish the foundation of mindfulness you need before you can start a focused practice like mindfulness of breathing?
Right. And second, and this is really the deep dive part, is that sustained moment-by-moment attention. Is it actually a neurological requirement for these absorbed states for jhana to happen?
Okay, that framing feels like we're building from the ground up. Building the cognitive runway before the plane can take off. So let's start at that baseline. The untrained mind, where is it? What's it actually doing most of the time?
Yeah, we have to start with what's called the default mode network, or the DMN.
The DMN.
This is what your brain is doing whenever it's not focused on a specific task. We used to think of it as rest, but it's not resting at all.
It's the brain's internal monologue, right? That constant chatter.
Exactly. When you're not focused on something external, your mind is incredibly active. It's engaged in what neuroscience calls stimulus-independent thought.
SIT.
SIT. Yeah. Just think of it as spontaneous mental time travel. Your mind is busy planning the future or ruminating about the past, maybe imagining social scenarios, or just dwelling on anxieties.
And the data on this is pretty stark. It's not just a fleeting thing.
Not at all. We have large-scale studies confirming that the average person spends almost 50% of their waking day in this state. Just mind-wandering.
Wow, half the day.
Half the day. And the kicker is, a lot of the self-generated thought is unfortunately linked to negatively valenced content, regret, worry, social comparisons, and it correlates directly with a drop in happiness. Left to its own devices, the brain can be a very efficient unhappiness machine.
So it's basically a massive cognitive interference system. If the DMN is always running these task-negative processes, how does the brain even switch gears to focus on something as simple as the breath?
Well, the difficulty is sort of built in. The DMN shows what's called a robust anti-correlation with the attentional networks.
The ones you need to focus.
The very ones you need. Think of it like two channels on a radio. When the DMN channel is cranked up, the attention channel gets suppressed. They actively interfere with each other.
So, okay, the goal isn't to get rid of the DMN entirely because we need it for other things like planning.
Right, you need it. The goal is to gain volitional control over it.
Which leads us right to our first big question. Before you can even focus on the breath, what's the mechanism that lets you notice you've been distracted in the first place?
That mechanism is the absolute first building block you need. It's a cognitive skill called discernment. In Pali, it's sampajana.
Okay.
Mindfulness itself, which is sort of a pure non-conceptual awareness, or sati, is only really useful when it's paired with this discernment. It's the process that lets you continuously access and appraise what your attention is doing as it happens.
So if awareness is the flashlight, discernment is the part of your brain that's interpreting what the flashlight is actually showing you.
That's a great way to put it precisely. If your goal is to focus on the breath, discernment is like a continuous mental motion detector. It's what's necessary to detect in real time when your attention has shifted away from the breath and wandered off into some thought stream.
Without that detection system, the thoughts just kind of run wild.
They develop completely unchallenged. They can spiral into rumination or fantasy before you even realize you're off task.
That's a really powerful way to frame it. You can't do the classic, bring your attention back to the breath if you don't have the discernment to, veto the distraction first. It's the ultimate cognitive check and balance system.
And that system is exactly what we're strengthening when we move into a formal focused practice. We're training top-down control.
Top-down control. It sounds very intentional. Can you break that down for us? How is it different from our normal experience of attention?
Sure. We basically categorize attention into two types. Top-down control is voluntary, it's goal-directed, and it's sustained. You are choosing to pay attention to this deep dive right now, ignoring other things.
Okay.
Bottom-up control is the opposite. It's automatic, it's stimulus-driven, it's transient. It's the loud crash outside that just reflexively grabs your attention.
Got it. So focused meditation is an exercise in just maxing out that top-down.
I'm suppressing the bottom-up.
Yeah. So when we engage in this voluntary sustained focus, Which brain networks are the heavy hitters?
We engage the central executive network, the CEN, and really critically, the frontoparietal network, or FPCN.
The FPCN.
Think of the FPCN as the master switchboard of attention. It's proposed to rapidly and flexibly couple with both the DMN and the other attentional networks. Its main job is contextual appropriateness, meaning it facilitates engagement with what you want to focus on, and just as important, it facilitates the disengagement from whatever is distracting you. It's the manager directing all the resources.
So the FPCN is the neurological muscle we're really working out.
Okay.
Does this training have a lasting effect? Or do things just go back to normal when you're done meditating?
This is where we see the profound change, the trait effect.
Okay.
Studies comparing experienced meditators to controls show really measurable changes. During meditation, the experienced practitioners show significantly reduced activity in those key DMN regions, like the anterior and posterior cingulate cortex.
Less activity than their own baseline.
Right. It suggests that mindfulness training cultivates a lasting cognitive skill. It's a refinement of attention that allows for mental quiet by just more efficiently suppressing that internal distraction. They've basically learned to turn down the DMN's volume knob permanently.
That is phenomenal. It's structural change driven by mental discipline. Which brings us right to the core of this deep dive. We have the foundation discernment. We have the control mechanics, the FPCN managing the DMN. So does this attention need to be utterly, absolutely consistent moment by moment for these deep states like jhana to happen? Or is there a little wiggle room?
The neurological hypothesis for these ecstatic states suggests that consistency is not just optional, it's the absolute requirement for maintaining the state.
Okay, let's get into that. Let's look at the mechanism of deep absorption, specifically jhana 2, which is described as a state of joy and rapture. How does pure mental focus lead to rapture? That seems like a leap.
Well, the leading research suggests that these states involve the self-stimulation of the brain's own reward system.
The dopamine system.
The dopamine system, yeah. The key parts of this pathway are the ventral tegmental area, or VTA, the nucleus accumbens, often called the pleasure center, and the medial orbital frontal cortex, the OFC. When you feel joy from anything, eating delicious food, winning something, this NHA-OFC circuit just lights up.
But we usually think of that loop as responding to something external. You know, the taste of the food, the sight of the reward. How can mental activity alone hijack that loop?
This is where the sustained focus becomes absolutely essential.
Yeah.
The NA and the medial OFC, they have these strong reciprocal connections that can form a positive feedback loop, a continuous circuit.
Okay.
Under normal circumstances, the moment you successfully observe one breath and your mind starts to feel a little stable, the system would immediately look for something new, novelty.
Right. A sight, a sound, a memory.
Any new input would capture attention, and that would cause the FPCN to disengage and switch resources. And that would instantly interrupt and short-circuit that internal reward loop.
So if your attention shifts, even for a split second, the circuit breaks. The feeling is gone before it can even build up and stabilize.
Exactly. For that reward loop to sustain itself, to build into this effortless absorbed state, your attention has to be so tightly focused that it prevents the brain from shifting to any novelty at all, internal or external. It has to continuously reinforce the loop. The brain is literally rewarding itself for not shifting focus.
Wow. This completely explains why the ancient instruction mindfulness of breathing is such a perfect vehicle for this training.
It's the ideal mechanism for that consistent moment-by-moment reinforcement. The formal instruction often describes breath awareness as a series of very short tasks that can each be completed successfully.
Wow.
So observing one full in-breath and out-breath is a momentary goal that's immediately achieved. A tiny reward is attained, which stabilizes the loop, and you do it again with the next breath and the next. This constant, non-interrupting reinforcement is the cognitive engine that lets you sustain focus without effort and for a very long time.
That's the gateway to absorption, to jhana.
That's the gateway.
What's so fascinating is that we're regulating the brain to such a fine degree that the act of successful, continuous attention becomes its own reward. It actually overrides our basic drive for novelty, which brings us right into the realm of, cognitive control and volition.
It does. We're moving from just instructed attention, being told to watch the breath, to genuine willed attention, which is a self-generated decision about where to apply your focus.
And does the brain process willed attention differently?
Oh, significantly. Willed attention, that act of generating and sustaining your own focus, involves additional neural activity. Specifically, we see more activation in key frontal regions, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or DACC.
The DACC, the brain's conflict monitor.
Right, and also the middle frontal gyrus and the anterior insula.
So what's the DACC's unique role here when we are choosing to sustain our attention?
The DACC is critical because it actually changes its functional network connections during willed attention. It acts as a mediator, a go-between for the FPCN and the dorsal attention network. It's the internal auditor.
So when it detects a conflict, like the mind starting to wander or an urge to check your phone,
It alerts the whole system. It helps the FPCN execute that disengagement from the distraction and re-engage with the goal.
this ability to detect conflict and then veto the distraction, it aligns so perfectly with this contemplative concept that some traditions have. The idea isn't that we have free will.
Because the will itself is a conditioned process.
Exactly, but that we possess free won't.
That's a beautiful way to connect the neurobiology to the spiritual framework.
Yeah.
Free won't is the ability to use that developed discernment and wisdom to inhibit, to slow down, or just restrain ourselves from following these conditioned habitual impulses.
Like the impulse to ruminate on an old argument or the reflex to react angrily to something small.
All of it. So the DACC and the FPCN are basically providing the neurological machinery for the won't. It's the ability to exercise a veto on the DMN's distractions or the reward system's demand for something new.
So this is the function of continuous mindfulness. The whole practice is built on this ability to detect and then successfully veto the distraction.
It shows us that consciousness isn't just a passive thing, it's an active goal-setting system. It's aligned with the DACC's conflict monitoring and the FPCN's executive control. And without this consistent moment-by-moment application of free won't, that focused goal of absorption, the jhana state, is simply unattainable. The positive reward loop just can't be sustained.
This has such profound implications way beyond just meditation. We started with the conceptual need for discernment for Sampajaja, and we moved all the way through the neurological reality of network management.
The FPCN controlling the DMN.
Right. And we've basically confirmed that sustained, moment-by-moment attention is the crucial link. It creates and reinforces that internal reward feedback loop that's necessary for the effortless, absorbed state of jhana.
And that consistency, it translates directly into behavioral regulation in your daily life. The ability of experienced meditators to regulate that internal reward system is, it's a breakthrough finding. They don't just find stillness, they change how their brains process desire itself.
The sources even suggest they can look at typical extrinsic rewards, like getting money or praise, and just see them as informational, as data points.
Not as inherently desirable things that they must pursue. They can choose whether to even engage that reward-seeking pathway.
So if consistent mental training gives you a mechanism for that kind of adaptive behavior, if you can intentionally train your attention to override these deep habitual drives for immediate external gratification, that suggests a level of self-mastery that applies to almost every challenge in the modern world.
It really does.
This is the real insight, I think. Attention isn't just about what you focus on. It's about what you successfully choose not to focus on, what you veto. So if you now understand the neurological architecture that's required for this deep absorption, a tight, continuous, non-interrupting focus, what long-term adaptive goal could you apply your own tightly focused moment-by-moment attention to starting right now? The tools for profound internal change are literally just waiting for you to switch them on.
It turns attention from this chaotic, automatic process into a deliberate, powerful act of volition. And that, I think, is the deepest dive of all.